Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Your Mark on the World show. We're producing this episode for Forbes, where I'm a contributor covering social entrepreneurship and impact investing. And today we have the great fortune of having with us one of our most frequent guests, John Taft, the CEO of RBC Wealth Management US. John, thanks for joining us again.
My pleasure, as always, Devin.
Well, it is fun to talk to you, John. RBC has in its DNA a real commitment to social responsibility, and it's fun to catch up with you from time to time because you so fully embody that ethic. And but you've recently been working on, or just completed, a new project. You've just compiled a book that really is a forward-thinking book about the impact that Wall Street can have for good. Tell us a little bit about this project.
Exactly. Well, it is a book, a collection of over 20 essays by thought leaders in academia, politics, regulatory world, and in finance about what the financial services industry, the financial sector, can do to be a more constructive force in society, a force for good, which is the title of the book. And we've been involved for the last 7 years since the financial crisis in looking backwards, pointing fingers, assigning blame, trying to understand what went wrong. But at some point in the process, anytime you have a betrayal or a breach of trust the way we did, you have to go through that kind of backward-looking process. But at some point, you need to draw a line and say, okay, enough. Let's look forward. How can we repair the damage, and how can we make things better? And I think that this is, in fact, the time to start doing that. And I asked 25 people to be contributors to the book, and 23 said yes. They all did it for no compensation, and 100% of the proceeds from the book sales are going to charity. So this is an indication to me that the most thoughtful and forward-looking people in the industry want to talk about this.
It is inspiring to see that and to understand that. What are some of the things, for the sake of context, John, what are some of the things that you think that Wall Street has done wrong?
Well, you could compile, volumes on the subject, but it's Michael Lewis actually just wrote a very interesting piece on, it was in Vanity Fair, and what it was it's actually a follow-up to his book called Flash Boys, which is about high-frequency trading. He talks about the fact that, everybody's focusing on high-frequency trading because that's the particular incidents that caused him to write the book. But he says the book is really about the system. So when you say what are some of the things that Wall Street did wrong, it's not just Wall Street. Okay, we're talking about a system in which all the players were complicit in a systemic failure. And the systemic failure was that the financial services industry lost touch with what its proper role is in society. And that's what we need to have a conversation about. And that's what the book that I just finished, A Force for Good, tries to talk about. What is the proper role of finance in society? Now, underneath that, there were lots of specific things that went wrong with the system. And quite frankly, I think a lot of those issues are or have been addressed. In other words, I'm one of these people who thinks that we're better off today than we were 7 years ago. We're better off today than we were going into the financial crisis. I think the system is safer, sounder, and more secure and can talk about all that, but a lot more still needs to be done. So what went wrong and what have we fixed and what needs to be done? For example, the regulatory infrastructure, the rules of the road that the financial sector was operating into in under going into the financial crisis was outdated. And we'd moved too far in the direction of deregulation, and the rules that were in place were still around from the 1930s. Okay, so those all need to be updated and strengthened, and we've made a lot of progress towards doing that in the last 5 to 7 years. The question is, how much more should we still do? There are some new problems the book talks about, one of which is that we've been clamping down on the regulated part of the financial services industry, for example, the big banks. And as we've done that, risk is moving, demonstrably moving, measurably moving from the regulated side of the industry to the unregulated side of the industry. And this unregulated side is called shadow banking. So the question is, are we doing enough to watch, and are we doing enough to regulate and prevent a buildup of excesses in the shadow banking world, which is just ultimately as dangerous as a buildup of excesses was in the regulated world? So that's something that the book talks about. We haven't restored fully investor trust and confidence in the financial markets. And that has to do with a whole bunch of things, one of which Michael Lewis wrote about, and that is the fact that the equity markets in the United States still have a lot of structural issues that allow or have allowed players to come in, game the system, and take advantage of smaller investors. And that is demonstrably true. Not universally true, but it happens. We've had technology glitches that have shut down the exchange or caused it to gyrate wildly, both in the stock and bond markets. Well, every time that happens, investors who are still skittish about the financial markets get spooked again. So we need to do more to restore trust. You know, we could go through the list. The system of retirement savings is inadequate and needs to be shorn up. The housing finance system, which caused the crisis in the first place, haven't done anything to put that on forward-looking, firm footing. And fiscal and monetary policy in the United States is wildly out of whack. All of those things, to some extent, were problems, to some extent have been fixed, but still need to be worked on going forward if we want the financial services industry to be a force for good in our society.
Does Wall Street have an obligation to do more than not cheat us?
Absolutely. I mean, the way I look at it, okay, is there's irresponsible behavior. I call it irresponsible finance. We saw that going into the financial crisis. Then what you're talking about is not cheating people, is really behaving responsibly. Right? That is an expectation society has and should have about the financial services industry, is that we behave responsibly. What my book tries to do is go to the next step, though, and I use the phrase enlightened finance. And enlightened finance is really about, let's have a conversation about what we want from our economic system. And this is where we start to get into your world, Devin. And we have a conversation about what we want. Now, in the past, when we had industrial capitalism and financial capitalism, the sort of the output we wanted, what the goal was, economic growth. Economic growth at any and at all costs. Along comes the financial crisis. We saw the effects of that particular pursuit of growth at all costs. And today, we are sobered and reflective, and we no longer, at least I'm not hearing, when I go out and ask competitors to write, or contributors to write about this subject, I'm not hearing that we want growth at any at all costs anymore. We want growth balanced with other goals, with other things. We want growth in the service of social goals. Like what? So I would just point out 4. We want growth balanced with stability. We don't want growth that blows the economic and financial system up every 5 to 10 years. We want growth balanced with sustainability. We don't want growth that degrades the planet to the point where human life is no longer sustainable, or where the quality of human life is degraded. We don't want growth where we create large disparities in wealth. Now, in the last 20 years or so, we brought a lot of people up out of extreme poverty. That's been one of the benefits of having broad adoption of a capitalist model. But at the same time, in our country in particular, we seem to be creating more and more extreme disparities in wealth between the top and the bottom portion of it. We don't want that. Why? We don't want it because it doesn't align with our values in the first case, and secondly, it's not good for growth. The wider the disparities in income and wealth, the worse it is for growth. And then lastly, we don't want growth driven by so much spending and so much debt that we end up bankrupting our children and grandchildren. So we want growth balanced with stability, growth balanced with inclusiveness, growth balanced with sustainability, and growth balanced with intergenerational equity. Okay, do we agree on that or don't we? Well, that's the conversation we need to have, and the financial service industry needs to be part of that, because ultimately our role is to enable the kind of growth that society says it wants. And if it wants sustainable growth, then we need to behave differently than if it wants growth leveraged and at all costs. And I think what the conversation that's going on is more and more players in the world want balanced growth, growth in the service of social goals, and that has implications for the financial services industry. And I think it's absolutely fascinating to read who's talking about this. These aren't people on the left. The governor of the Bank of England, who was the governor of the Bank of Canada, a mainstream central banker, wrote a speech a year ago on inclusive capitalism. Now that tells you something. This is a different world from the world of Milton Friedman in the 1960s.
It really is an exciting time. I want to shift gears just a little bit, John, to take advantage of the opportunity to visit with you as a leader personally, and just get you to look a little bit introspectively, if we can, for just a minute. You are a role model to I don't know how many countless people who look up to you, admire you, want to follow in your footsteps. Who do you hold out as your role model? Who are you looking to when you need an example?
Well, there are the living and the deceased. So I've been fortunate in the course of my life and career to have a number of individuals who have had a huge impact on me, and I can go into them. But if you ask me to rank number one, it would be somebody that one of my ancestors, and I wrote about him in my first book, Stewardship, and that was my grandfather, Robert Taft, who was the Senate Majority Leader, two-time candidate, actually three-time candidate for president, never got the Republican nomination. His nickname was Mr. Republican. He is the only member of Congress, Senate or the House of Representatives, to have a memorial built in his honor on a Capitol ground, and it's a bell tower, 10 stories tall, with a carillon, statue, reflecting pool, the whole deal, with marble inscribed with sayings from his life. And there's a chapter in John F. Kennedy's book, Profiles in Courage, about what he did courageously in the course of his career, and I admire him more than anybody I've ever met or read about. But I admire his qualities in many of the people I grew up with and have met in my life who are still alive. And he was just absolutely a man of principle, and in a kind of throwback, anachronistic way. Not rigid, but at his core, he had things he stood for that he believed completely and that he would risk everything to uphold. And I think he inspires me. He always has in the course of my life. I wish I had that kind of moral compass, and aspire to it, but don't know that I've replicated it fully. But I admire that in people who have a strong moral compass.
Now, that's a great point. Now, John, you could be focusing on a lot of things. Why are you personally? What draws you to this concept of enlightened finance?
Well, I believe. I keep saying this. Let's not forget. I am a card-carrying Republican. I am a baby boomer. I am a card-carrying capitalist, and I've worked for 30-plus years in the financial services industry. So I'm a mainstream person, and I believe in the benefits of capitalism. I believe in the role that the financial services industry plays in capitalism. But I have also watched what I believe has been the corrupting of what can fundamentally be an amazing engine for improving the lives of human beings in the world, and that is, moral capitalism, balanced capitalism, social or inclusive or regenerative or sustainable capitalism. And we have an opportunity now to redirect our economic model for the century ahead. I feel it's a point in time and an inflection point, truly historic. And I have a sense of urgency and a sense of mission around being part of redirecting our economic system and the financial services industry that supports that. There's a chapter in my book by Robert Shiller, who has been one of the most generous participants in this Force for Good project I've been involved with. He's a Nobel laureate. He's spent hours with me. He contributed a chapter to the book. He went on television to talk about the book and the themes of the book. He has gone to on social media to talk about the themes in the book. And his chapter is Finance in the Good Society, and I find that I have a connection with him because for whatever reason he believed the finance can improve the world, be a force for good, and I feel that. So what keeps us from getting there? To me, it's just we need to change the conversation, and we need to have people who are standard bearers leading us in that direction. And I'm doing it because I don't see others doing it, or I'm doing it because I see others doing it, but they don't have the voice yet, or the visibility, or the platform. And I'm trying to give them that, or be a part of that. I don't mean to be grandiose in this. I guess I'm just trying to sign up for that. There is so much opportunity and so much promise in the world today that if we just do things right, think clearly and carefully around what we really want, there's nothing we can't accomplish. And I think that's exciting.
John, before we go, I want you to give us just one good tip, something that we can all do to begin the snowball rolling downhill of creating this enlightened finance world that you envision.
Well, first of all, I would go online, one of my co-conspirators in the book, and I would click on the CFA Institute website. The CFA Institute has done more to think about, promote, post on their website materials about what we can do practically to change the role, make a more constructive role for finance. And they have, among other things, a project called the Future of Finance Initiative, which has a bunch of luminaries involved talking about all of this. And they have codes of ethics, they have integrity principles, just a lot of good thought leadership. So I would say go online to do that. But the message, one of the messages from the CFA Institute is, it's one of those things, when you want to be an agent of change, don't try to boil the ocean. Just what can you do tangibly and immediately later today or tomorrow morning to be a force for good, to be a moral exemplar, to be a standard bearer for integrity, and core principles in your world and in your life, professional life. Start small. Do something. And that's how you get the snowball started. I think the snowball, Devin, is a real good analogy for how to approach this project. You don't start with a snowball. You just start rolling it down the hill, and that's what we all need to do.
Oh, that's great, John. How do people get the book? Where do they find it?
Well, you can buy it Amazon.com or any Barnes and Noble or a hardcover bookstore. You can also go to the website www.forceforgoodbook.com, and you can see materials on all of that. And as I say, I'm happy to promote it because all proceeds go to the CFA Institute Research Foundation, to the SIFMA Foundation for financial literacy, which is a huge issue in the world today, and other not-for-profits that contribute to a more constructive role for finance.
Fantastic. John, thank you very much for being with us today. It's been a joy to have you.
My pleasure, Devin. Thank you.
All righty. Let's do some good.